on the 10th of December 2007 on WBRM Radio in Boston and on the Bostonred Network. This is a special presentation in the form of an update to a program that we did during the week, Joe McCarthy's Bus. It was about McCarthyism in the 50s, and it applies to, as the writer Garrison Keillor called, the mania involving sexual harassment. It is not meant to diminish sexual harassment, but around the mania that overtook not only Mr. Keillor, but Al Franken of Minnesota. And we'll have some updates on Al Franken, and also updates on Judge Roy Moore and some polling there. But firstly, we need to take care of the sports. The Downtown Athletic Club in New York, the Heisman Trophy winner, was the quarterback of the Oklahoma Sooners, one Baker Mayfield. Did you expect me to be here when you talked to me back then? That is, the Austin, Texas native said on Friday, joking. That was Mr. Mayfield. Mr. Mayfield was a walk-on at Texas Tech with the Red Raiders team. He later walked on with the Oklahoma Sooners. He is what they call a sub-6-foot quarterback with no major college offers, period. And no one evidently was looking for Mr. Mayfield. But Mayfield said, with 2,398 total points and 732 first-place votes, the quarterback who walked on at Oklahoma after spending a year as a walk-on at Texas Tech, won the trophy on Saturday night, a year after attending the trophy presentation as a finalist. This time, Mayfield finished ahead of the Stanford running back Bryce Love, 1,300 total points, and the 2016 winner Lamar Jackson of Louisville, 793 points there when he evidently won his Heisman trophy. So Mr. Mayfield is off. The signal caller, who had the third highest percentage of total points in Heisman winning since 1950. His 86% trailed only Marcus Mariota with 90.9% in 2014 from Oregon, and Troy Smith 91.6 from Ohio State in 2006. Mayfield led the number 2 Oklahoma to 12-1 record and a Big 12 championship of this season on the 1st of January. The Sooners will take on Georgia in the Rose Bowl, presented by Northwestern Mutual as part of a semi-final round of the college football playoffs. Mayfield is the first player to win the Heisman after walking on to a team. The NCAA didn't recognize the walk-on concept until 1950. So Mayfield went on to say, "My family, I love you guys. There were times that we had to move, and you guys made sacrifices after sacrifices just so I could chase my dream. I wouldn't be here without you. Love you." This is from Mr. Mayfield. Not only was Mayfield a two-time walk-on, but he also was an undersized recruit coming out of talent-rich Texas. Even when he did get an opportunity to play at Oklahoma, he had to fight hard for the starting job. 2 years after that, his character became a question. A little public intoxication, disorderly conduct resisting arrest and fleeing. Twice this season, he drew the ire of opponents. In Ohio, at Ohio State in September, he planted an Oklahoma flag on the turf at the Ohio Stadium immediately following a road win over ranked the Buckeyes last month. The cameras caught Mayfield shouting profanities and making obscene gestures towards Kansas players. He, of course, apologized, which any person would do. The athletic director there at Oklahoma, Joe Costello, what did he do? Credits Mayfield for working on bettering his perception while also improving how a person can make what once seemed impossible possible, regardless of what anyone chooses to do in their life. This is an inspirational story, according to the athletic director. Well, no doubt about that. And let's look at quickly here the teams that in the pros would be best suited there. This is from NFL.com. ESPN had it over there too, but they evidently wanted to charge for it. Exclusive to the Arizona Cardinals. He'd be a perfect fit in Arizona. He has the same style and swagger to match the head coach. That's Bruce Anders. I have no idea who he is. Anyway, the Los Angeles Chargers, who used to be in San Diego, good fit for them. You have a number one receiver named Keenan Allen. And you have a number one back in Mr. Marvin Gordon. And a number of other players there. The third team would be the Saints in New Orleans. Drew Brees is getting up there in age, no doubt about that, would benefit from learning under him for a couple of years before taking over the style, no doubt about that. But Drew Brees is a little taller than this man. The Jacksonville Jaguars, with the defense and the running game, he could start right away with Jacksonville. And the hero O.J. Simpson's old team, the Buffalo Bills, isn't as athletic as Tyrone Taylor, but he's a much better passer. Well, we'll see about how good of a passer he is in time. The NBA scores from last night. The Wizards were at the Clippers in Los Angeles, won 13-112. Very close game, 1 point there. The Heat and the Nets in New York. Heat 101-89 for the Nets. The Lakers and the Hornets in Charlotte. Lakers 110-99. Lakers been winning a few games lately. The 76ers and Cavaliers in Cleveland. Cavaliers 105-98. The Knickerbockers and Bulls in Chicago. Bulls 104-102 for the Knicks. The Jazz and Bucks in Milwaukee. Bucks 117-100 for the Jazz. And in overtime, the Thunder were at the Grizzly. Thunder 102 to 101. The Spurs were in Phoenix. Spurs 104-101 for the Phoenix Suns. The Rockets were in Portland, 124-117. Rockets of Houston over the Trailblazers of Portland. I guess the Trailblazers spent too much time walking the Oregon Trail. That does it for sports. And let's go on here to the political situation. We'll get to some polling here. But first we'll finish up a little piece out of Minnesota and Al Franken. And the race that is set up here in 2018's special election. That'll be to fill Al Franken's seat. He is resigning later this month, we assume. And this is from the Star Tribune of Minneapolis. Franken's decision to step down amidst growing sexual harassment scandal has scrambled Minnesota's 2018 election which was already on track to be the most high-stakes political cycle in the state in years. A looming battle for control of the U.S. House could run up to 5 competitive races in Minnesota. The open governor's race puts Republicans in a position to take full control of the state government for the first time in a half-century. No one has declared for the new Senate race yet, but many big names are out there. The person that the governor, Dayton, was thinking of replacing Al Franken with, Tina Smith, and a former governor, Tim Pawlenty, otherwise known as Tim who tried to run for president and went nowhere at all. This Smith seems a likely choice. She was literally viewed as a caretaker appointment who wouldn't run, but now Smith has ideas she would run. Anyone who gets in will need to demonstrate an ability to organize quickly, fundraise, and create a campaign to go the distance in 2018 and again in 2012. That is according to the president of the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Loon. Republicans still fear about losing ground in the first midterm elections under DJ Trump disasters for the president's party in 1982 and 1994. That was on the Bill Clinton. 82 was on the Ronald Reagan. And 2010, that was on the Barack Obama. So some of the names thrown out here, difficult to say. The turnout in 2014 was 50% compared to 76% in 2012. So that sort of gives you an idea. The difference of 1 million votes will be a punishing effort for the DFL. That is the Democrat Farm Labor Party. Turnout is always a problem in midterm elections. That's according to the president of the Minnesota AFL-CIO, Bill McCarthy. Joe Davis, executive director of Alliance for Better Minnesota, said a second Senate race will further nationalize the election in Minnesota. And it goes on here with some of the characters. We won't go into them. Ina Pawlenty, for a national Republican point of view, he's a dream candidate. That is Josh Holmes, a Minnesotan who was formerly chief of staff to old man McConnell. Now he's a consultant in D.C. This Pawlenty character is a lobbyist who shuttles between D.C. and Minnesota. The Financial Services Roundtable paid him $2.6 million in 2015, as according to IRS documents. His lobbying work gives him access to $15 million to $20 million that political operatives say would be needed in each of the 2018 and 2020 elections. A public policy poll in November was commissioned by this Better Minnesota outfit of 871 Minnesota voters interviewed. 33% said they had a favorable opinion of Pawlenty. 36% had an unfavorable opinion of him. And several others could come out of there. Somebody named Eric Paulson and Jason Lewis used to be a talk show host that has a seat that used to be occupied by Michelle Bachmann. And other people mentioned Keith Ellison, Betty McCullough. These are people that represent congressional districts in the Twin Cities area. And Rick Nolan, who is in the 8th district, that is the northern east part of Minnesota. And that is basically about it. The best DFL candidate for 2018 to confer the advantage of incumbency going into 212. To 220. That is a little bit of a problem because if you have a placeholder there like Smith, you really don't have the candidate. And another mentioned candidate is the Attorney General, Lori, Swanson, who was many felt would run for governor of Minnesota. So that is one of those situations that is kind of moving around. Let me just update you also on Garrison Keillor. Garrison Keillor has obtained a criminal defense lawyer, and he is, as they say, moving forward. They're negotiating. No doubt the shadow of a lawsuit looms over the public radio station in Minnesota. And they are trying to settle the situation in Minnesota, and a very difficult situation because things have been said, and Garrison Keillor looks at these statements as defaming his reputation. So thus you have it set up there, challenge, as he said. It's up to the lawyers now to deal with the consequences of the actions. So again, that is one of the big situations that is coming there. And for the Democratic Party in Minnesota, they had a mishap in 1976 where they had a governor there named Anderson that had high approval ratings, etc., and he appointed himself in one of these, what LBJ would say, cute gimmicks to the Senate. And when he came up for election, he promptly lost the seat. And Hubert Horatio Humphrey, who was the senator from Minnesota, died in office, and his seat was lost to the Republican Party. So in other words, it was a disaster. And part of the problem with the Smith character, she is a lieutenant governor, but according to the latest, the Minnesota Constitution, the Republican functionary in the Senate would become the lieutenant governor. The problem there is that the current governor is, I believe, 70 years old, not in the greatest of health, period, and that could set up a situation where this person could literally become a governor. I'm not sure about how the transition would occur, but it's not a situation you want to take a chance. We've already had a disaster in Corey leaving the Consumer Financial Protection Agency to run for the governorship of Ohio. Now, that is a situation where, quote-unquote, personal opportunism outweighs the functions he would have been able to serve, serving the people, because, again, they would not have changed their chairmans, and now they have this bloodsucker there, Mulvaney, who is the Treasury Secretary. I think he's Treasury Secretary. And he's running that agency also, and it is in the courts. So again, you have a contentious situation that should not have been here. That is always a question when in these political parties that you have people that want to move up or move back or whatever their personal motives are that outweigh the needs of their party. And in this case, the needs of the people of Ohio and the nation, actually, with the Consumer Protection Bureau. Now, that in itself is not a very good situation. Can this cadre win in Ohio? The book is out on that one. First of all, the governor there now will not be able, because of limits, to run in the next election. So it is open. But the Democratic Party in Ohio has been dysfunctional in the last few years in their ability to elect the people statewide. Now, they do indeed have a Senate slot there, but they also have a situation where the Republicans could move in. And, of course, in the statewide positions. I believe the Republicans have a lock on all of those positions throughout the state of Ohio. The Democrats do have the mayor in Cleveland, in Columbus, and I believe also in Cincinnati. But again, the rural parts of Ohio, and that is the reason DJ Trump won Ohio. Cassius, the governor there, was not a DJ Trump supporter. In fact, he ran against DJ Trump, besmirched DJ Trump. But there's a situation there. Our own Nina is running out of the Bernie movement. She is running. Turner is running for governor there also. Let's take a very quick look at the national scene, and we'll look at the polling in with Roy Jones. Now, what has happened with Roy Jones is that one of the major people that claimed that Roy Jones had a liaison, we'll call it, to clean it up a little bit, with her when she was a teenager, has now got to be a situation in which this yearbook, the woman had added some text to it herself. So in itself, this is a very interesting situation with what has happened in Alabama. The polls favor Jones, and let's go to it very quickly here. This referenda on in Alabama. For many voters unaccustomed to competitive elections, the national attention that has come. This is Dateline, Robert Acosta, Birmingham, Alabama. A bitter showdown between Judge Moore and Doug Wimpy Jones. Supporters of Jones say with concern that a win by the firebred Roy Moore would derail the state's efforts to escape its painful history and rebrand it as a forward-thinking place, welcoming to Fortune 500 companies. Now, recently they have shifted the entire situation here on the competitiveness of Alabama, which is not very competitive to begin with, period. With the Fortune 500 to attract a business there. You travel across the country and you say Alabama and something goes right across people's minds there. That is from a retired actor, a Democrat. He shops at Piggly Wiggly. I don't want to apologize anymore for where I am from because there's a pocket of stubbornness in my state. Supporters of Moore, meanwhile, see his candidacy as a conduit for the rejection of the national media and quote-unquote political elites. I don't believe a word they say about him. That's from J.W. Poor, a 77-year-old retired home builder and Republican outside of a Lowe's improvement store. Moore, 70, with his apocalyptic warnings about Muslims, gay rights, against Jones, a low-key 63-year-old lawyer best known for prosecuting the KKK in the Birmingham 1963 bombings. One pivotal group will be voters who feel caught between two visions, must pick a side, especially Republican-leaning voters. Very important there. In the past several decades, Alabama has successfully been transformed from a large agrarian economy based around poultry, timber, to manufacturing and a technological hub anchored in growing a federal contracting community. Much of aerospace industry is based in Huntsville. Mercedes-Benz is there, a core supply of the company's recent relocation to rural Bibb County. GE Aviation recently announced $20 million in investment from the shadows of the University of Alabama's football stadium to Moore's hilly hometown of Gladden's. Voters, African Americans and Europeans Democrats say they are deliberating in their communities. Well, the deliberation will end very soon. Business leaders say the state's image have taken a hit with the resignation of Bentley. He was the governor there. That had an affair with another woman. Moore, who supports abortion rights, whose campaign headquarters has a Planned Parenthood on its wall, has struggled to win over Republicans such as Joanne Turner, a 71-year-old nurse, no doubt. A mostly white Birmingham suburb. I've been in Alabama for 42 years, and I am so tired of publicly being so bad, but it's not who we are. It's embarrassing. Turner referring to allegations against Moore and the racial tensions associated with the state. People today, the generation of today, have put what's happened behind us, and you look at his neighbor. It's great, good Christian people. She goes on to say, all that said, Turner added, I can't vote for Roy Moore. I can't vote for Doug Jones. I've spent my life helping to deliver babies. I have to write in because at the end of the day, this is my conscience. Billy Hopper, a soft-spoken 73-year-old Republican, said she stands by Moore and will support him. While Trump has endorsed Moore as his former White House chief strategist, Bannon, Strange and veteran Richard Selby have remained weary of Moore. Selby's a senator there. Right, wrong, indifferent, that's who we are. As Ron Pace, an Army veteran and Democrat, says of breakfast at Fife's restaurant in downtown Birmingham. When asked about Moore 5 more years from now, there's going to be another Roy Moore, and we'll vote in the interest of that Christian coalition. I know Roy Moore personally. He's an easygoing guy. I don't believe he did what they accuse him of doing. That's Michael Newsom, a burly 22-year-old Gladstone area welder. So in the rural towns, that's Roy Moore country there, and that has been established. Roy Moore isn't part of that plan, according to 19-year-old Republican student who's studying marketing, Ellen Ginnigan. My family's been friends with Luther Strangelove for years, and said on her way to a meeting, she added, every time you think we are going forward, something like Roy Moore sets us back. Tim Booth, he's a construction worker, however, has no such anguish over Moore. Chewing tobacco, wearing camouflage hunting hat, Booth said, I want to see Kennedy John Wilkes Booth, said voting on Tuesday was more of a rebuff to the state's critics than a reckoning of its residents. People can't see us the way they want to, Booth said. It's like the way we look at California. They should be in their own little country. So in other words, minds have been made up, and that is basically it. The Republican tax plan, this is from the Washington Post. Moves from what the middle class would think about. And can Congress, well, maybe we won't even get into that one. Kathleen Parker has Al Franken martyr. I read that the other day, won't go into it here. We'll be on the Monday morning quarterback. Amidst boycotts and protests, Trump pays tribute to brave men and women of the civil rights movement. Yeah, that was a situation where no one showed up, at least none of the civil rights movements did. And Saturday Night Live, they had a parody there of Roy Moore, DJ Trump, etc. on Santa's naughty list. Well, I'm surprised they're on any list. DJ Trump called Medgar Evers a hero at the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum is a joke because everything DJ Trump has done is in direct contradiction to the life of Medgar Evers. And, the other part of throwing off the bus was John Conyers Jr. The race announced his resignation at the Milford Gaddis show. He'd been there for 52 years. His son, John Conyers III, he's 27 years old, who the elder lawmaker suggested but she, at the same time, she meticulously avoided showing any support for the congressman's hand-picked person. He's, of course, 88 years old. That's John Conyers Jr. And even before the announcement there, another relative in Conyers, a 29-year-old a great-nephew, announced his own candidacy. The state senator Coleman Young II there, he isn't going very far. Gateway Snyder, the campaign promised to be brutal, and along Gateway Snyder, Republican. Where's Gateway Snyder? Just went flying by him. Announced that he would leave the vacant seat until the already scheduled November 2018 election to reduce the financial burden on taxpayers. On a state law, he could call a special election as soon as May. The decision aligns with the recommendation of the district chairman there in Detroit. So in other words, effectively the people will not have representation there until November. That's almost a year. So in other words, the seat will be vacant. Now this is where the tragedy comes in there. John Conyers should have remained where he was. To have a congressional seat open for the first time in a half century, that's going to uncork all kinds of awful lot of ambition in southeast Michigan. Now, this John Conyers Jr. describes himself online as a hedge fund manager who lives in Detroit and L.A. He was arrested but not prosecuted in the... Oh, that's his girlfriend. Well, anyway, that doesn't really matter. One person who hopes to undermine the case for the third is his own cousin. Well, anyway, kind of a family situation here. It doesn't really matter very much because the election is a long ways out there. So all kinds of machinations around this particular election. A lot of African Americans will be running out of Detroit. And the district went for the Hillary to Monster Clinton by 61 points. It seemed to remain in Democratic hands. The tragedy of it is that seat will disappear, no doubt, after 2020 recount of the census. So again, and they put it in here, the Wolverine state will lose a seat after 2000 census and will almost certainly reduce the city to just one prominently African American seat, and that's Brenda Lawrence, who represents the upper portion of Detroit. So Detroit had basically two Congress types out of Detroit. John Conyers III has not established himself here. Ian Conyers was just elected the first time last year. So, a very lightweight situation in Detroit. I think we brought you up to the poll here out of Alabama. We'll hit on it. And the edited version of Gunner Joe McCarthy's bus will cut Al Franklin's speech short. Now, this is on Saturday. This is Moore by 4. This is Trendthugger group poll. They're usually pretty. They have him up by 5, and also we have a Gaddis poll here that has Moore up by 4, Moore 49 to 45 over Jones, and in the Trafalgar poll, Jones is at 51 to 46. So 4 and 5 are what we have the latest there, and Gallup has DJ Trump at 37. That was on a Saturday. Some of the last polling probably we'll have out of Alabama. I'm just guessing here. And if we go back, we had more up by 7 on a Tuesday. That was a strategic research poll. There's a number of these polls up, basically, and wait a minute, we'll see if we can quickly look. Otherwise, we'll be on the Monday morning quarterback, and perhaps we'll have another poll out here. But 4 or 5. Let's go to Gaddis real quickly here. I just want to see what the margin of error is for them. And we'll quickly find out here. Doug Kaplan is the contact here. Gravis Marketing, nonpartisan research firm. This is 1,254 likely voters across Alabama was conducted the 5th through the 8th of December. Margin of error here is a plus or minus 2.8%. How likely are you to vote in the runoff for this? 78% said very likely. The voters that they polled here. Do you approve or disapprove of DJ Trump? 45% approved. 10% strongly approved, 10% somewhat, 4%, 38% disapproved. That's very interesting there in itself. Will you vote for a Democrat or Republican for the U.S. House of Representatives in 2018? 51% will vote, 52% for the Republican, 37% for the Democrats. How favorable or unfavorable are you towards a towards DJ Trump? 43% were very favorable, 11% somewhat favorable, 40% very unfavorable. So I guess DJ Trump endorsing somebody doesn't help out very much. Favorabilities for Roy Moore, 31% very favorable, somewhat favorable, 14% unfavorable at 45% for Roy Moore. For Jones, very favorable at 34%. Somewhat favorable at 11%, uncertain 5%. Uncertain, incidentally, was also 5% there. And very favorable at 43%. Just behind him a little bit there. In the Senate primary, Roy, let me see. Who did you vote for in the primary for U.S. Senate? 31% for Roy Jones, 45% for Moore, 20% for Lupus Strangelove, 5% for Mo Brooks, etc. And the sexual allegations, yes, you heard about them. 93% heard about the likely to vote. Accusations here. 24%, 21% less likely to vote. No impact at all, 55%. So that tells you basically where the allegations go. Here, Hell Day, whom would you vote? 49% for Judge Moore and 45% there for Jones. Do you believe the Washington Post did the right thing in publishing the accusations? 48% yes, 38% no. Do you think it is likely, who do you think is likely telling the truth? For the women, 43%, for Moore, 36%, and 20% uncertain. That's a big group. The 4 women, who do you think is likely telling the truth? For the 4 women, 43%, Jones, 36%, 20% don't know. That's a large percentage there. Oops. Roy Jones. Do you trust Roy Jones? 40% do. 47% do not trust Mr. Jones. But 13% are uncertain about it. That's probably where you want to go. The following questions are for demographic purposes. Which party you're affiliated with? 30% with the Democratic Party, 17% Iowa Independent, and 53%. So most of the people in this poll were Republicans. Europeans, 73%. African Americans, 22%. Only 2% were Latinos. Not much there. Protestants and Christians, 45%. Other affiliations, 26%. Evangelical Christians, 20% of those. And Muslims, 1%. Jewish people didn't even show up. Some high school, no diploma, 3%. High school graduates, 22%. Some college, 31%. BA degrees, 30%. And graduate degrees, 14%. Very unusual, I think, there. The incomes under 30, 19%. 30 to 50,000, 21%. Quite a well thing. And 26%, 100,000 to 150,000, 12%. That was to 26%. A wealthy poll, probably why the Republicans are in it. The 18 to 29-year-olds, 12% of those. 30 to 49, 31%. 50 to 64, 32%, and over that 25%. The genders, females 52%, males 48% of the poll. And that's it. Anyway, it gives you a little idea there. Plus or minus, that is the Gravis poll. So looking at that, more can be ahead by 2 or 3 points, depending on where they are. And the Trafalgar poll, let's see here. Oh, another PDF poll. Doug Jones at 40.46, leaning to Jones at 5.31. Roy Moore in this poll is at 47.63. The leaners at 3.5, and somebody else. Kind of. Anyway, Doug Jones, of course, at 46. We already went through that, and I guess that was all that we have here. Short and sweet poll, I suppose. The confidence level is 95%. Response rate 3.12. I didn't give the error rate here. This is 1,419 likely voters in the Trafalgar group survey, and that's really all that they have to say. Not a lot. Anyway, nonetheless, that is the latest polling. We'll see you on the Monday Morning Quarterback on a Monday morning. We'll look at the talk shows and more than likely some more polling here and other juicy news. We're trying to put the final wraps on the new program all about sports. A little bit of preview there when we were talking about Baker Mayfield and likely proteins. We'll extend that in the next broadcast. We have a numbers man. That's a macroeconomics program. It is up on many of these channels. Just go to numbers man at iHeart, at Spreaker, on YouTube. It's there also. And we'll get an open source report up later today. And we're also finishing up the Australian Parliament's vote on same-sex marriage. And we'll throw in there some events coming out of Minnesota on Justine's case. Justine was killed in Minnesota, Des Moines. And by the end of the month, the state's attorney there should decide whether to prosecute the police type that shot her across the chest of his partner, named Mohammed Noor, N-O-R. Good day, and have a good rest of your weekend.
A couple months ago, I felt that we had entered an important moment in the history of this country. We were finally beginning to listen to women about the ways in which men's actions affect them. The moment was long overdue. I was excited for that conversation and hopeful that it would result in real change that made life better for women all across the country and in every part of our society. Then the conversation turned to me. Over the last few weeks, a number of women have come forward to talk about how they felt my actions had affected them. I was shocked. I was upset. But in responding to their claims, I also wanted to be respectful of that broader conversation, because all women deserve to be heard and their experiences taken seriously. I think that was the right thing to do. I also think it gave some people the false impression that I was admitting to doing things that, in fact, I haven't done. Some of the allegations against me are simply not true. Others I remember very differently. I said at the outset that the Ethics Committee was the right venue for these allegations to be heard and investigated and evaluated on their merits, that I was prepared to cooperate fully, and that I was confident in the outcome. You know, an important part of the conversation we've been having the last few months has been about how men abuse their power and privilege to hurt women. I am proud that during my time in the Senate, I have used my power to be a champion of women, and that I have earned a reputation as someone who respects the women I work alongside every day. I know there's been a very different picture of me painted over the last few weeks, but I know who I really am. Serving in the United States Senate has been the great honor of my life. I know in my heart that nothing I have done as a senator, nothing, has brought this honor on this institution. And I am confident that the Ethics Committee would agree. Nevertheless, today I am announcing that in the coming weeks, I will be resigning as a member of the United States Senate. I, of all people, am aware that there is some irony in the fact that I am leaving while a man who has bragged on tape about his history of sexual assault sits in the Oval Office, and a man who has repeatedly preyed on young girls campaigns for the Senate with the full support of his party. But this decision is not about me. It's about the people of Minnesota. And it's become clear that I can't both pursue the Ethics Committee process and at the same time remain an effective senator for them. Let me be clear. I may be resigning my seat, but I am not giving up my voice. I will continue to stand up for the things I believe in as a citizen and as an activist. But Minnesotans deserve a senator who can focus with all her energy on addressing the challenges they face every day. There is a big part of me that will always regret having to walk away from this job with so much work left to be done. But I have faith that the work will continue because I have faith in the people who have helped me do it. I have faith in the dedicated, funny, selfless, brilliant young men and women on my staff. They have so much more to contribute to our country. And I hope that, as disappointed as they may feel today, everyone who has worked for me knows how much I admire and respect them. I have faith in my colleagues, especially my senior senator, Amy Klobuchar. I would not have been able to do this job without her guidance and wisdom. And I have faith, or at least hope, that members of this Senate will find the political courage necessary to keep asking the tough questions, hold this administration accountable, and stand up for the truth. I have faith in the activists who organized to help me win my first campaign and who have kept on organizing to help fight for the people who needed us. Kids facing bullying, seniors worried about the price of prescription drugs, Native Americans who have been overlooked for far too long, working people who have been taking it on the chin for a generation, everyone in the middle class, and everyone aspiring to join it. I have faith in the proud legacy of progressive advocacy that I have had the privilege to be a part of. I think I've probably repeated these words 10,000 times over the years. Paul Wellstone's famous quote, "The future belongs to those who are passionate and work hard." It's still true. It will always be true. And most of all, I have faith in Minnesota. A big part of this job is going around the state and listening to what people need from Washington. But more often than not, when I'm home, I am blown away by how much Minnesota has to offer the entire country and the entire world. The people I've had the honor of representing are brilliant and creative and hardworking, and whoever holds this seat next will inherit the challenge I've enjoyed for the last 8.5 years, being as good as the people you serve. This has been a tough few weeks for me, but I am a very, very lucky man. I have a beautiful, healthy family that I love and that loves me very much. I'm going to be just fine. I'd just like to end with one last thing. I did not grow up wanting to be a politician. I came to this relatively late in life. I had to learn a lot on the fly. It wasn't easy and it wasn't always fun. And I'm not just talking about today. This is a hard thing to do with your life. There are a lot of long hours and late nights and hard lessons. And there is no guarantee that all your work and sacrifice will ever pay off. I won my first election by 312 votes. Could have easily gone the other way. And even when you win, progress is far from inevitable. Paul Wellstone spent his whole life working for mental health parity. Didn't pass until 6 years after Paul died. This year, a lot of people who didn't grow up imagining that they'd ever get involved in politics have done just that. They've gone to their first protest march or made their first call to a member of Congress, or maybe even taken the leap and put their names on a ballot. It can be such a rush to look around a room full of people ready to fight alongside you, to feel that energy, to imagine that better things are possible. But you too will experience setbacks and defeats and disappointments. There will be days when you will wonder whether it's worth it. What I want you to know is that even today, even on the worst day of my political life, I feel like it's all been worth it. Politics, Paul Wellstone told us, is about the improvement of people's lives. I know that the work I've been able to do has improved people's lives. I would do it all over again in a heartbeat. For a decade now, every time I would get tired or discouraged or frustrated, I would think about the people I was doing this for and would get me back up on my feet. I know the same will be true for everyone who decides to pursue a politics that is about improving people's lives. And I hope you know that I will be fighting alongside you every step of the way. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.